Hey everyone, it's Selwen here. Let's talk about the Shadow Priest. Yes, the changes have finally come to Shadow Priest. The much needed changes for the past 2+ years are finally here, and they are pretty goddamn good. Now, I do want to profess a couple of things before we dive deep into it. One of those things is the fact that currently in the beta it's very hard to actually class test, to spec test, because we no longer have max level premates that we can just create and dive into Covenant abilities and test out conduits and legendaries. So I'm not going to really touch on those aspects. I'm going to mention them a little bit because they do create some interesting synergies, but I don't want to talk too much about them because I haven't been able to play a lot with them to warrant an opinion and to talk about. So hopefully next week or something like that they bring the premates back. And the other thing is that do take all of this with a slight pinch of salt because, this is the first big change. There's going to be other small changes, there's going to be tuning, there's things that are going to be changed as we get gear and so on. So do take all of this in mind that things might change, and there are a couple of weird things, but for the most part, Shadow Priest is playing pretty goddamn good. So, let's talk about the baseline core playstyle of Shadow Priest, that the way it's playing right now. So instead of being all about Void form and being about that window and Void eruptions and so on, the spec has turned, or well, regressed into being more about keeping up dots and being a pure builder and spender. Okay, it's a pure builder and spender at its core. So you're gonna be doing your dots and keeping up your dots, and you could be building your insanity. That obviously talents and whatnot are gonna enhance and stuff, but you're gonna be able to build up insanity. Mind blasts right now actually feel pretty nice. Their damage is pretty meaningful, and then at 50 insanity you're gonna be able to put out your nuke dot, which is Devouring Plague, which deals a lot of damage. Right now, this is the core idea with the spec at its bare bones level. It's building insanity, keeping up your dots, doing your Devouring Plagues, right? You still have your Shadow Word Death, okay? It is now baseline, thank God. It still is damaging you in the classic way that you both love and hate. And below 20% of health, it deals 150% more damage. You also have a couple of other baseline abilities back, like Power Infusion, Mind, Soothe, which is pretty nice as well. Has some pretty niche uses in Mythic Plus, in dungeons rather, to skip packs. Mass Dispel also has some extra use now in dispelling bursting. But yeah, those are our baseline changes there too. Now we have a couple of passives, some new ones and some that are slightly changed, like your Shadowy Apparitions, which are now coming from your Mind Blasts, your Devouring Plagues, or your Void Bolts. So the more of those you do, so the more Devouring Plagues you do, the more Shadow Apparitions that you're going to get, and crits with those abilities, like Devouring Plague is a dot, but deals damage instantly. With crits, you're going to get 2 Apparitions. So you can probably guess that during Void form, this is going to trigger quite a lot. And in fact, right now it's kind of silly. You get so many of them, it's very silly to see. So yeah, and then you get Dark Thoughts. Dark Thoughts are your new passive/old talent that is giving you a proc to your Mind Blast. So for each of your dots that you have active on a target, your Mind Flay or Mind Seer have a 2% chance, or 4% chance, you have 2 dots, to trigger a Dark Thought, which is going to provide you an instant cast Mind Blast, and you can use it while channeling your Mind Flays, which is very, very nice. So the other very nice thing about this ability is that it's going to give you a charge. So it's not going to overwrite your current cooldown of Mind Blast. It's going to give you an extra charge, so it just flows very nice. This feels very smooth to use, especially again that you can use it while casting Mind Flay. So you're going to be able to put that on cooldown, constantly on cooldown. Actually, I'm not even keeping my dots, but you're going to be able to keep Mind Blast constantly on cooldown, and every time you get a Mind Flare, you get a proc, you use it during the cast, you can go into your next Mind Blast without having some weird overriding business. It just flows nice, it feels smooth, it feels nice. Then we get to our new Void Eruption / Void form. So what is our new Void form? So it no longer is that ability that drains insanity. The way it's working right now is that it's a 90-second cooldown, and that's it. It's a cooldown. It's your main cooldown. Again, you do have Power Infusion, which is increasing your haste by 25%, but this is your main cooldown. Basically, when you press your Void Eruption, which you need 90 Insanity to go into, so there is a ramp-up time there, you're going to go into your Void form, which is going to increase your spell damage by 20%, give you an extra charge on Mind Blast, so kind of like the proc, but, constantly, and it's going to give you access to Void Bolt. So what is Void form doing, for the most part, is giving you more insanity to go for more Devouring Plagues. That is kind of the idea right now. Now, your Devouring Plagues, you cannot just, go for multiple of them. They have a limit. They do have the pandemic effect, so if you refresh them near below 3 seconds, it's gonna last up to 8 seconds as opposed to the 6, which is the baseline duration. So they do have pandemic, but you cannot increase, say, Devouring Plague up towards to like 20 seconds or something like that if you use them repeatedly. So you do have to sparse them out. You need to know when you should use them. But essentially, that's your new Void form. It's a cooldown that is going to allow you to go for Void Bolts, which will mean more insanity. They would still gonna add that duration to your dots, which is nice. They're gonna give you more Mind Blasts, and essentially it's gonna provide you to do a lot more Devouring Plagues, which is your big damaging ability. It hits like a truckload. So that's the idea. It's that in Void form you're gonna keep that Devouring Plagues up. Obviously you're gonna get other benefits like Shadow Apparitions are gonna be super prominent during that void form phases, because you're going to get Void Bolts, which are going to trigger that. You're going to get more Bind Blasts, which are going to trigger that. You're going to get more Devouring Plagues, which are going to trigger that. And if you go for your talent, which are, improving your Shadow Apparitions, you're getting extra insanity for that. So it just kind of goes into this insanity ball, which is just providing more and more insanity for more Devouring Plagues, and one thing synergizes off one another for that cool effect, which is nice. So it's pretty simple. It's nothing too complex. It's pretty simple. You're building, dumping, and keeping up dots. That's the main gist of it. If you like it or not, well, that's entirely up to you. I personally like it. I think that makes perfect sense. There's some cool synergies, and we haven't even touched talents and some other things. So, for me, it just feels nice. And also, just as a side note, Devouring Plague is actually healing you for the 50% of the damage dealt, and Vampiric Touch is also healing you for the 50% of damage dealt. And that on top of Vampiric Embrace, currently right now you can heal yourself so much that you can top yourself in just a few seconds, which is pretty nice. Not sure if that's gonna stay, but it feels very powerful that you can self-heal yourself so easily. So yeah, Shadow Fiend is still present as well. It's still providing you insanity if you're curious. The way it's kind of working right now is that you still kind of want to use it during your Void form, so it's providing you again more insanity for more Devouring Plagues, which is going to cause more apparitions and so on. So as this our little prissy friend here, as you can see, so many of them. So yeah, that is the idea with that. But you can technically use your fiends to, say, build insanity quicker doing your opener, so you can go into a Void form quicker, because on openers there is that ramp up time. You can use it there. I don't think that's optimal, but technically you can do that. Talents do help with that a little bit though. So talents, we do have Fortress of Mind still, which does feel a little bit out of place because it's so boring. It's just giving extra damage and extra insanity, just kind of And then we have Unfurling Darkness. This is a new one. Now, a cool thing about this talent is that it's making your Vampiric Touch give you a buff, which doesn't have a timer, that is going to cause your next Vampiric Touch to be instant cast and deal some instant damage immediately, right? But cannot occur every 15 seconds. So the first thing you're going to see about this ability is you're going to think, well, this is going to be pretty good for me to multi-dot, right? So I'm going to get instant cast, I'm going to save me some cast time and stuff. And yeah, that's true to some extent. It's going to work like that. But where this works the best is actually in single target. Why? Because this is effectively giving you the ability to never hard cast a Vampiric Touch again. Why? Because Vampiric Touch lasts for 21 seconds, while this buff cannot occur every 15 seconds. That aligns to about the duration that you're going to refresh your Vampiric Touch anyway, which means if you refresh it at the appropriate moments, you never have to hard cast it again, and you get some extra damage on top, which actually hits harder than a Mind Blast. So it's giving you some extra mobility, and it's giving you some damage on top, which is nice. Feels nice too. So this kind of feels like a single target option that does have some usefulness when you're multi-dotting. Then you have Death and Madness, which is improving your Shadow Word Death. So this one is making, when you use Shadow Word Death, a debuff will stay on the target, like right here, stay on the target for 6 seconds. I'm going to put some footage in the background so you can visualize that better too. But it's going to stay on the target for 6 seconds, and if the target dies within those 6 seconds, you're going to gain some Insanity over time for 4 seconds when the target dies, and your cooldown gets reset, which is also very nice. It has some really nice usefulness when you're going in dungeons, when you're going from mob to mob, trash pack to trash pack, to just to give you a lot more Insanity for you to spend on Devouring Plagues or your new Searing Nightmare, which we'll get to. So yeah, that feels nice. The only weird thing about this is that even if the debuff triggers, you're still damaging yourself. Now you can imagine if you're using this on, say, 3 targets, 4 targets, well, like you use one, that target dies, so it's reset, so you use on the other one, and so on and so forth, you're just damaging yourself quite a lot. So I would suggest that, even though I kind of like that mechanic, it's very, thematic on Shadow Priests. Isn't that so gorgeous? It's very thematic on Shadow Priests, but yeah, you're damaging yourself quite a lot, so I would like to see a little benefit there where if the target dies within those 6 seconds, you don't take damage, because I think that would make more sense and make this a little bit more usable and not so, self-damaging to yourself, which is kind of silly right now. This tier right here is the same. So this one here and this one here is kind of like single target choices, big multi-target choices, and small multi-target choices. So we have the new Searing Nightmare, which is replacing your Dark Void. So what this is doing is making every time you go into a Mind Seer, you're going to get this ability that you can press, and it's going to spread Shadow Word Pains, doesn't have a cooldown, and it's going to damage targets, but that damage is increased if Shadow Word Pain is already active. So this is essentially providing you a spender for multi-target situations. So if you have, like, say, 4 targets, 5 targets, you're not really going to press Devouring Plagues, so you're going to press this instead. Now, this is, of course, really awesome to use. This also deals a lot of damage. This is making you much more valuable for, say, Mythic Plus. And this doesn't have a target cap in a world where a lot of specs have target caps, and this one hasn't. Neither do all of your dots. So yeah, this is pretty big. So this overall feels very nice as well. But you still have Misery, which is just making your Vampiric Touch apply Shadow Word Pain. So this feels nice when you have, say, 3 targets, for an example, and you're not really going to benefit from spending Insanity on Searing Nightmares, because you're going to be spending on the Devouring Plagues. So you're not going to take this, you're going to take Misery instead, so you continue to use Devouring Plagues, you don't want to waste Insanity on that, so you have this benefit right there. Or you could take Waste of Fate, which is more single target, obviously works for multi-target as well, but feels a little bit more focused, like for bosses and stuff, for that damage increase near their death, near the execute phases, which also feels pretty nice. Then we have this one, which is a very similar tier, where we have Psychic Link, which was a PvP talent, which is making your Mind Blast hit all targets that have Vampiric Touch active. So this is obviously going to synergize pretty well with Misery. So these two together also feels pretty nice, because you're just applying your 2 dots. You don't have the benefit of spreading your Searing Nightmares immediately and having that bursty damage, quote unquote, when every time you do your Mind Seers, but you can just do Vampiric Touch. You can spread your dots really easily, and then you can just keep up those dots, let's say on 3 targets. Keep up those dots, and you can do your Mind Seers and, say, use our Devouring Plague on a priority target, and just kind of keep that up. If you get the proc, you're going to get that Mind Blast, which are going to trigger the Psychic Link, and so on and so forth. So this feels like nice if you have, say, again, 3 targets, something like that, and Searing Nightmare feels really nice when you have a lot more, so in a dungeon. So again, situational uses that makes all of these talents kind of feel worth the take. So then we have Auspicious Spirits, which obviously feel really nice when you're just focusing on one target. Why? Because you're going to get a lot of spirits when you're just focusing a lot of single target damaging abilities like Void Bolts and stuff like that. Obviously, also going to be pretty worth if you say like a 2-target boss fight. So then it becomes a numbers thing over spirits over Psychic Link. Shadow Crash still kind of feels like it has a use, but not as useful due to Psychic Link, because obviously Shadow Crash has a big travel time, and I'm going to click this, I know, that what a travesty. Has a big travel time, which kind of sucks, and it has a cooldown, and why take this when you can spread your vampiric touches for a big Mind Blast AoE? Well, if you have a lot of little ads, Shadow Crash still has that niche use, right? If you have a lot of ads, little ads that need to die quick, Shadow Crash still has a use. So it's not as useful as these other two, but it still feels like it has a place. Not as a big place as I would like it to, but still feels like it has a place, which is nice too. Then we get to this tier. Now, this tier also is pretty nice. Why you get Damnation? Now, Damnation is essentially providing you an on-demand, very short cooldown ability for you to apply all of your dots, your Pain, your Vampiric Touch, and your Devouring Plague. So, the big thing about this is that you're going to get a free Devouring Plague. Use it, you get a free Devouring Plague. Now, this does create a synergy with Unfurling Darkness, because this will proc that as well. So, if you use this, say, on openers, you're going to get this procced, and you're never going to have to hardcast a Vampiric Touch again during that fight if you play correctly, which is nice. Obviously, this also feels very nice if you're in a 2-boss fight, if you in a to spread your dots, so in a dungeon as well, kind of feels nice to have this, to just, have this instant cast ability to just put all of your dots and put a Devouring Plague, say, on a priority target, just to have a lot of damage going straight off. So it feels nice as well there. And now the problem is that you have Mindbender. And Mindbender right now is obviously providing Insanity, which is providing more Devouring Plays. Obviously very nice to stack up with your Void Form and your Power Infusion, which provides haste. But Mindbender right now has a lot going for it in your Legendaries and in your Conduits, because your Legendary, it's providing, what's it called? It's providing Shadow Flame Prism? Is providing your Mindbender or Shadow Fiend to deal 20% additional damage as Shadow Flame and reduce the cooldown by 40%. So this is really big. And on top of that, you also have a Conduit, which is making your Shadow Fiend attack speed increased by 20%, and it deals 10% more, and that is going to increase per rank on that sole Conduit. So that is going to make you your Shadow Fiend, and in turn you specking into Mindbender, very, very valuable, because you're just going to be able to use it a lot if the things stay the way they are, and it's just going to provide you a shitload of Insanity a lot, and it's going to deal a lot of damage. So this feels like if you go for that combo of items of powers, Mindbender feels very, very powerful. So yeah, kind of due to those, it kind of kills this tier a little bit. But again, we'll see in time. Then we have Voigt Torrent, which also changed. So no longer it has to, to stop the drain of Insanity. And it's now just providing you this nuke ability that you can use every 45 seconds, which aligns with your Void Form cooldown of 90 seconds. And is a big nuke ability for 4 seconds, and while channeling, all of your dots are refreshed on the target, which is actually kind of nice, and it's going to give you 60 Insanity, so it's going to feed you directly into a Devouring Plague. So it's giving you a big ability. It kind of feels a little bit bursty if you need a little bit more burst in single target. The only thing I don't like about this is that while you're channeling, I feel like I should be casting Void Bolts, because you're going to miss out on a Void Bolt, I believe, and Mind Blast. Obviously, haste will change this up, but I kind of feel like I should be casting that for the spirits. So it kind of feels counterintuitive if you say we go for Voigt Torrent and the spirits talent, but still not missing out on Insanity, because this is giving you a lot of Insanity, so it's counterbalancing that. But yeah, it feels nice, but at the same time, it's not perfect. I think that's what I mean. It's not perfect. But I like the idea of having this burst ability if you so want to. But again, Mindbender might be way too powerful by the end. Then we get the last tier, which is Ancient Madness. This is pretty simple. Every time you go into Void Form, you're going to get crit, which is just buffing the spec. Obviously, you scale really well with haste and crit. Your spirits are going to proc twice. You're going to have 2 if you crit, so obviously you're going to get extra benefit out of that. So it creates a direct synergy with the spirits talent as well, because you're going to get more, so you're going to get more insanity if you stack those up, which is pretty nice too. But other than that, it's pretty simple stat amp buff. Then you have Legacy of the Void, which is a Blizzard pun to Void Form, which is making your Void Form no longer has a duration, and then so essentially you're gonna go back into having the old Void Form where it's gonna drain your sanity, and it's gonna increase your spell damage while doing Void Form by an additional 5%. Now I'm not sure the place of this. I like the idea that you have an option to go back to the old playstyle, and the idea with this is that once you have enough gear, and if you want to play around with this, you have the ability to extend your Void Form window beyond the static duration that you have baseline. But the issue with this is that it kind of counteracts against Devouring Plague, because you don't want to use Devouring Plague during Legacy of the Void Form, because you're constantly draining. So you don't want to spend Insanity. Like I used 1 and immediately I'm out. Even if with gear that might be a little bit awkward. So I'm not entirely sure the idea of that, unless outside of it just being cool that you have an option to go back to the old Void Form. Other than that, it feels kind of weird. And then you have Surrender to Madness, which is providing you an extra cooldown. It's completely separate from your Void Form cooldown Void Eruption, which is immediately immediately puts you in Void Form. It casts a Void Eruption, gives you 100% Insanity, and for the next 25 seconds, your Insanity generating abilities generate 100% more Insanity, and you can cast while moving, as you might expect, but if you don't kill a target within those 25 seconds, you die, which is very cool. I love that mechanic of Surrender to Madness. Now, this feels like obviously a very handicapped version of, say, the Legion version of Surrender to Madness. Now, I like the idea that you have this talent that you can get into, that you can essentially execute bosses if you have the gear that can hold up and the gear to hold up. Now, it's not providing you much, because essentially what it's doing is just allowing you to go for more Devouring Plagues, and that's it, because your Void Form is not ever increasing your damage or ever increasing haste and stuff like that, right? It's just providing you more Insanity to go for more Devouring Plagues, and that's it. And it's just 25 seconds, which is not much more than a regular Void Form window. So it feels a little bit underwhelming for me. I like the idea. It feels nice to have this option for a couple of bosses, just to have some dumb fun, essentially. But could be a little bit better, I think. Could be a little bit better. So essentially that covers Shadow Priest, the way it's playing. Feels pretty nice to me. Feels smooth. It feels like it makes sense. All of your abilities make sense. You have some wonderful synergies. It flows super well. It is pretty simple. I think, like, if you criticize for something, is that it feels pretty simple. You're just building and spending Insanity and keeping up dots. Now, I do like the plays around Devouring Plague. I think that is going to get more interesting as you get more and more gear to build more and more Insanity quicker. And then with crit, you're also going to be able to get more Insanity due to the more spirits and so on. So with gear, I think Shadow Priest is going to get a lot more better. But the way it plays right now is just nice. It's just nice. It makes sense. It has all the tools that it requires it to have. You don't have any weird things going on. You don't have this counterintuitiveness with your abilities, with your Void Form. So yeah, looking forward to what else changes it's going to come. Looking forward to how it's going to play out when you get more gear and Covenant abilities, because I really want to talk about that, but I can't because we cannot really test that optimally. And once those are easy access to test, I'll make sure to update the video on that. But for now, pretty big step in the right direction and looking pretty goddamn good. Alright guys, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.